Hello everyone, this is Ruslan Belov, and you're watching the daily combat update from the Ukrainian front. So yesterday the Europeans, the Americans and the Ukrainians met in Geneva to discuss Trump's plan. And what do you think is happening there? Of course, they're changing the points, and they're changing them to conditions that are absolutely disadvantageous for Russia. For example, no withdrawal of the Ukrainian armed forces from the Donetsk region, a freeze along the current line of contact, and only later, during negotiations, territorial questions will supposedly be resolved. Sure, right. And what will they be doing during this time? Naturally, strengthening defensive lines. Plus, no reduction of the Ukrainian army, plus no guarantee of not joining NATO. In short, everything that Russia will simply reject outright. That's why peace is drifting farther and farther away. Fighting on the front continues, and Ukraine has enormous problems. New statistics on deserters for 2025 have appeared. Let me remind you, in June they began counting deserters under new parameters, which slightly lowered the numbers at a time when it was clear that the number was growing month after month. Officially, the number of deserters for 2025 is listed as 161,000 people, meaning at least half of the men Zelensky's team seized from the streets during the harsh mobilization are running from the front. This is one of the key reasons why Ukraine simply cannot sustain this war for another couple of years. More and more Ukrainians understand that they are merely pawns in this globalist game against Russia. This realization is the main source of demoralization. Ordinary people do not want to fight for Zelensky's regime. Added to this is the corruption within the government, as it became clear that Zelensky and his circle have lined their pockets well during the war, likely earning billions of dollars while the rest of the country lives under completely different conditions. Everyone understands that the leaked recordings were only the tip of the iceberg of corruption in the highest levels of Ukrainian power. Now let's move to the front. So friends, over the past 24 hours, the Russian army once again demonstrated very strong results. 3 settlements and almost 40 square kilometers of territory came under Russian control, and the south grouping activated what had long been a dead direction, the Kramatorsk axis, or more precisely, the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk direction. And that's exactly where we'll begin today. Here, Russian troops made a breakthrough to the west almost 5 kilometers deep and managed to take control of the village of Pazeno. Its old name is Petrovskoye. This is part of the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk sector. In fact, this entire area between Chasiv Yar and Siversk is exactly that direction. And it had been completely stagnant for a very long time. Just so you understand how stagnant, see the village of Sako and Vanzetti. The push toward Pazeno was launched from there. Do you know when Sako and Vanzetti came under Russian control? Back on February 1st, 2023, more than 2.5 years ago, and for 2.5 years there was no movement here at all. But now the ice has broken, and not just a small shift, but a major push ending with a captured settlement. What does the capture of Pazeno mean, and what are the prospects? Well, obviously there must also be work done southward toward Vasyukivka, but if we talk specifically about the vector from Pazeno, then the next targets are Nikiforivka, and the main objective, Ry-Oleksandrivka. The plan is to move north from there, linking up with Russian forces pushing south. The idea is that the front will ultimately align like this, and you can see what prospects open up in that case. These are already the approaches to the town of Mykolaiivka, and from there it's only 13 kilometers to Sloviansk, not much at all. Whether the plan succeeds, we'll see soon. Again, this is an extremely difficult sector. It remained static for more than 2.5 years. Nevertheless, movement is coming from the north, and fighting has already begun for Ozern, which is why activity here has increased as well. In Siversk itself, there are no updates for now. During the first 3 days of the offensive, a lot was achieved, but at the moment it's quiet. Not quiet in the sense that fighting has stopped. Battles continue, but there is no news of further successes yet. Moving on. The next news about advances comes from the sector under responsibility of the East grouping, namely in the Dnipropetrovsk region. 2 areas saw progress and 2 villages were taken. But before that, a few words about Pokrovsk. Yesterday, Ukrainian sources released an amusing statement claiming that the Skala battalion had cleared the central part of Pokrovsk. Sure they did. These are the same people who recently cleared Torske. I'd love to ask them, how's Torske going for you? It was under Russian control, and it still is. Same story here. What center did they clear? Their absolute maximum is launching small counterattacks on the northern outskirts of Pokrovsk. Meanwhile, everything is firmly under Russian control, and Russian servicemen, in response to the nonsense Ukrainians began spreading, recorded a video message from the center of Pokrovsk showing that everything is under tight Russian control. There is also insider information that the Ukrainian military had hidden a large number of FPV drone operators inside Pokrovsk, and they were eliminated by the Russian army. As a result, the number of Ukrainian drones in the sky has noticeably decreased. For drone operators, a city like Pokrovsk is ideal. Lots of tall buildings to hide in and work safely. But now, Ukrainian forces no longer have that advantage. Meanwhile, on the Russian side, there is progress toward Dobropilya. Yesterday, many telegram channels and even some media outlets rushed to claim that Russian troops had taken Kharkov. This is not true. Yes, there was an advance. From the direction of Vladimirovka, Russian forces broke through defensive lines, entered the southern part of Kharkov, and secured positions there. However, the main part of the village is not yet under Russian control. Heavy fighting continues. The map correctly marks it as a grey zone, which it indeed is, a layered front line. Without doubt, in the coming days, Russian troops will clear Kharkov completely, and after that, the movement will continue towards Sofiivka. Now back to the advances by the East grouping. First, troops managed to break through 6 kilometers, reach the village of Tike and take it under control. This is a very important development because beyond the river lies the village of Kolomytsi, and everyone understands this is the next Russian target. What happens if troops cross the river and capture Kolomytsi? That would open a direct road to Pokrovsky. Right now, Russian positions are only 6 kilometers from Pokrovsky. Again, not much. But there is one serious obstacle, the Volkhya River and the village of Kolomytsi on the opposite bank. If these two obstacles are overcome, then there are no more barriers. And although Pokrovsky is officially listed as an urban-type settlement rather than a city, in reality it is essentially a small town. The population is over 10,000 people, and the built-up area includes multi-story districts. So it's a very serious settlement, and the front is getting closer and closer to it. But that's not all. There was also an advance to the southwest, and this too matters in the context of a potential offensive toward Pokrovsky. Here, the troops advanced across a 4.5-kilometer wide section and took the village of Otradny under control. And look, from Otradny to the north, there is a direct road all the way to Oleksandrivka. And now it's secured from both sides, from Hai and from Otradna. Interestingly, Ukrainian sources literally yesterday claimed they retook Hai. Meanwhile, Russian troops released objective control footage from Otradna. Yet again, Ukrainians were caught lying. Of course, they recaptured nothing. In this sector, under responsibility of the East grouping, all they are doing is retreating. Here's what the future prospects look like. I believe that the push toward Pokrovska will come a bit later. First, the troops will secure access to the Haicha River. From Otradny, the advance will move westward toward Andriivka. And only after Andriivka is taken will a wide front push begin north toward Pokrovska. When it comes to the numbers of territorial gains, on 2 sectors in the Dnipropetrovsk region, Russian forces secured control over more than 22 square kilometers. In the Dnipropetrovsk region alone, 32 settlements are already under Russian control, and that number continues to grow. Another sector where the Russian army is advancing is the Zaporizhzhia region, the Orikhiv axis. Here, the Dnepr group has accomplished a critical task. They managed to enter Novodanilivka. Footage from objective control showed Russian presence in the southern part of the village. I also have direct contacts there, and already yesterday morning, before anyone knew of any intensified action in Novodanilivka, a soldier wrote to me saying that the entire village was under Russian control. At the same time, Ukrainian forces are trying to launch counterattacks to regain it, so the fighting there is extremely intense. If Russia manages to hold Novodanilivka, The entire pocket between Novodanilivka and Malotokmachka will be cleared next. Plus, there used to be 3 defensive lines blocking the Russian approach toward Orikhiv: Novoandriivka, Novodanilivka, and Malotokmachka. Now only Novoandriivka remains. In short, the battle for Orikhiv is also approaching. Summing up the past 24 hours on the front line, 3 villages and 38.5 square kilometers of territory have come under Russian control. Notice how steadily and rapidly the Russian army is advancing. Day after day, the figure exceeds 30 square kilometers. Meanwhile, things are going badly for Zelensky, yet Kiev is still trying to produce a peace proposal shaped in such a way that Russia simply cannot accept it. The British newspaper, The Telegraph, has published the full text of the EU's peace plan for the Ukraine conflict, drafted in response to US President Donald Trump's proposals. The EU document consists of 24 points. Moscow will reject it 100%. Unlike the US proposal, which at least formally mentioned territorial issues and limits on Ukraine's armament, the EU document follows the old Western formula: restore everything, punish Russia, arm Ukraine. The essence of the EU plan is simple: Russia must end hostilities, return all POWs and some territories. Ukraine, meanwhile, receives security guarantees from the US and Europe, the right to join NATO, control over the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and even the Kinburn spit. In other words, all the bonuses to Ukraine, 0 concessions from Kiev. While sanctions against Russia may be gradually eased, this will only happen after Moscow pays compensation to Ukraine, effectively using its frozen assets. The Kremlin will obviously consider the document unacceptable. None of Russia's core demands, Ukraine's neutrality, demilitarization, or the prohibition of NATO deployments, are even mentioned. A Kremlin insider says Russia is actually benefiting from the globalists trying to delay Trump's peace plan. This is the first time in a long while when globalist actions in the military track benefit Russia, according to the Telegram channel Legitimny. Especially since the Kremlin has little desire to end the war, now that a chance to take control of more territory has emerged. Yet Russia is still ready to accept even the current terms of the peace plan. According to the source, Russia's forces aim to expand control in the Zaporizhzhia region, with the long-term goal of advancing closer to Zaporizhzhia city. The longer Ukraine drags out accepting Trump's conditions, the greater the likelihood that the entire front collapses, making the previous terms irrelevant and allowing the Kremlin to renegotiate. Bloomberg reports that Europe, cornered by Trump's plan, is trying to slow down the US president, who gave Zelensky a deadline until Thursday. The speed with which the White House is pushing the proposal shocked Ukraine and its allies. "Oh, we are adopting our 19th package of sanctions." The US Treasury Secretary mocked Europe's measures against Russia. Europeans tell me, "Oh, we are adopting our 19th package of sanctions." In my opinion, if you're doing something for the 19th time, that's your failure, Scott Bessent told NBC. European states keep expanding restrictions, but the effectiveness of these measures is questionable. Bessent added that discussions with European colleagues show very different assessments of sanctions' impact on Russia's economy. The Telegraph writes that Europe has lost its role in great power politics and cannot support Ukraine. European leaders promised Kiev generous backing, but Europe simply lacks the funds to cover Ukraine's budget deficit of more than $60 billion. There is not enough money or weapons even for basic defense. The grim truth is that European leaders act as if they are still global power players. But that role is long gone. They may lie to Kiev and themselves about their commitment, but the numbers say otherwise. Donald Trump has begun to realize that Zelensky and the globalists are undermining his peace plan by stalling negotiations and putting forward inflated, unrealistic demands. His post during the Geneva talks signals that the negotiations went badly for the peace process. The war between Russia and Ukraine is brutal and horrific, and under strong and proper leadership of the US and Ukraine, it would never have happened. It began long before I took office for the second time, under the administration of sleepy Joe Biden, and only worsened. Ukraine's leadership has shown no gratitude for our efforts, and Europe continues buying Russian oil, Trump wrote. The globalists will disrupt and stretch out the negotiation process because they don't believe Trump will act against Ukraine or punish Zelensky. We will see. We constantly talk about how there was Minsk, then Istanbul, and later Istanbul too. Yet Zelensky, under globalist pressure, rejected any terms the Telegram channel Resident reports. The situation may worsen further for Kyiv. If Zelensky refuses to sign a peace deal, Ukraine will face far harsher terms. US officials are telling NATO allies in Kyiv exactly that, writes The Guardian. American officials want Zelensky to sign the documents in the coming days. No deal is perfect, but it must be concluded as soon as possible, US General Driscoll said during the meeting. Sources in the president's office say Andriy Yermak, together with British intelligence, has finalized draft proposals for Trump's plan that could help Ukraine delay the negotiations. The key requirement is a ceasefire along the line of contact before any implementation steps, plus an air war truce. Bankova believes it can regain initiative in the diplomatic track. But Moscow will not agree, that is obvious. Why would the Kremlin accept this when more settlements come under its control every day? Everything points to the war continuing. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán revealed Europe's military plans with concrete numbers. Brussels plans to maintain a 1 million-strong army to keep striking Russia non-stop, while simultaneously preparing fresh forces. The EU intends to spend 20 to 25% of its 7-year budget on maintaining a Ukrainian army of 1 million personnel, ensuring constant pressure on Russia. Meanwhile, Europe will expand and strengthen its own forces to defeat a weakened post-operation Russia. Thank you for watching. Stay sharp, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next report.